Welcome, readers, to the fourth in a series of weekly talks on the 2021 Summer Read Selection You Belong by Sebene Selassie. Hello, I'm Ryan Bankert, Adult Services Manager at Guthrie Memorial Library. WellSpan Health, WITF's Transforming Health, Capital Blue Cross, and 80 libraries throughout the central Pennsylvania region are in collaboration for this year's Summer Read program. We welcome the YMCA of York as a program partner this year. Selassie, through research and storytelling, reassures us that we do belong, even though at times we may feel disconnected. She offers suggestions for us to move back to a place where we will all feel that we belong. This evening's topic is You Belong from Beginning to End. We will have two group presentations this evening with several speakers followed by a discussion session. Attendees will be muted during the presentation. You are welcome to put your questions and comments in chat. We will be sure to share them after both sets of speakers. We will unmute during the Q&A afterwards if you want to ask your questions verbally.
Good evening. I am Michele Lefler, Director at Paul Smith Library in Southern York County. I am also here to talk about my role as a death doula. This evening's topic explores being present with some different options to consider from birth to the end days. The first presenter is Morgan Barnsley, who will explain how a postpartum doula can help new parents to cope with sometimes overwhelming changes that come with the new arrival. Next, we will hear from the Horizon Advanced Care Planning staff at WellSpan Health, Roberta Geidner, Manager, and Eve Gardner, Coordinator. Then we will introduce the topic of death doulas. I will be back to talk about that along with my associate, Debra Tuskar. First, let's meet Morgan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Morgan. Thank you so much for having me here today. Just a little bit about me. I own my own business called Essential Root Wellness, and part of the services I offer are postpartum doula services. I've been serving the community now for 4 years, and it's really a joy for me to see families welcome their new addition to their home and to help guide them through that. So the presentation I'll be doing today is in regards to that, and I'll take any questions at the end. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So what is a postpartum doula? Basically a doula is a support person, and postpartum would be somebody who goes in after the birth of the baby. The majority of the clients would be up to a year during that time frame. As you can see here on the slide, we work to provide information and support on infant feeding, emotional and physical recovery from childbirth, infant soothing, coping skills for new parents. Sometimes we're helping with light housework. A lot of what I would do and what I still do is laundry, because that can pile up. We help with some meals, and if there's other children in the home, to help incorporate them into the experience as well. You can go ahead to the next slide. So I listed 4 benefits of a postpartum doula. There are many, but these are the 4 that I thought was most important. So supporting the family to adjust at life at home. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing some light chores, dishes, laundry, meal prep, helping mom and dad feel more confident in their new roles. I find that both parents are, especially newer parents, are trying to feel more confident if they haven't done it before, and how dad can help mom and how mom can communicate to dad. So we work a lot on that. Supporting napping and proper rest, because especially coming home, if moms are feeling well, many want to get up and just do things instead of resting. So we talk about that. Keeping siblings entertained, so that's always a fun part. So overall, we're just trying to get routines in place and offering suggestions. So that's a big part of what a postpartum doula does. Emotional support is the next one, and I find this to be one of the ones that is probably most important. A lot of moms have expressed to me feeling isolated after the birth of their baby. And so having somebody to talk to that also is a professional, that maybe won't be a family member, or if there's something they might not be comfortable talking to friends about, that's a really good way that a postpartum doula can be supportive. Breast or bottle feeding support. If you've never fed an infant before, it can be a little bit different, and sometimes we need a little support with that. And then the sleeping, that's a really big one. So a lot of times families will hire a postpartum doula to come in just so they can get some sleep. So I think we all know if we don't sleep, we can have some other things that can come up in life that can be a challenge. So that is a big thing that postpartum doulas can help with. Next slide, please. So our postpartum doula is worth it. I always tell people, absolutely, they're worth it. A lot of times when we talk about like, can you afford the services? I always offer as a, baby shower gifts and stuff like that to pay for hours for a postpartum doula. So I always think that that's a good gift that you can give someone. But any little extra help after birth is worth it in my opinion. But they are especially good for these first-time parents who are expecting multiples. I know I've supported many families with twins. Moms who had complicated deliveries and may not be able to do a whole lot physically, or their spouse works, so they don't have anybody there. They don't have local families to help. Parents of colicky babies or anybody who's had difficulties, it's really worth to have a doula present when you bring your baby home. Next slide. So I think that was about it. So if anybody has any questions, I'm not sure if we're taking them now or if we're waiting till the end. But I think this is a great service. Not many people know about the support, and I feel it could be a benefit to the individuals I talked about earlier.
Thank you, Morgan.
You're welcome.
We will be taking all the questions at the end.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And thank you again. And we now welcome the WellSpan Horizon Advanced Care Planning Team, Roberta and Eve.
Thank you, Ryan, so much. And welcome to our event tonight, everyone. My part of this is really to talk about the gift of conversation. And if we really think about the title of this book, and belonging, the gift that we can give to each other when we face the end of our life is a tremendous gift. And by sharing with our loved ones what our exact wishes are and having someone who can speak for us, who's already designated before we're in that crisis, makes a tremendous difference. So Abby, the next slide. So what we'd like to do tonight is, in this short segment that we have, is to really talk about how you begin these conversations, whether it's with your children, with your parents, with doctors in hospitals, even in your community. And then to review some of the resources that are available that make these conversations easier to have and that help you to prepare for them. This is not a topic most of us are very comfortable with. And so what we're doing at WellSpan and what many people are doing across the country is really helping many of our community members as well as our healthcare teams to be much more comfortable in having a cherished conversation. And then setting your steps for the future. So how do you plan for having these conversations, and who do you have them with? And so this first video clip begins to set the stage on who would you pick to be the person who would speak for you, but mostly, how do you start that conversation with someone when it's so difficult to bring it up? So Abby, if you'll start the video.
Mom. Dad. Sweetie, can we talk?
Everyone, dies.
So, how do you want to go? Do you have a plan for your end-of-life care? Because I don't. Don't take this the wrong way, but you're not getting any younger.
So I was binge watching Game of Thrones, which reminded me that everybody dies.
Whoa. You've heard of a birth plan, right? It's like that, only the opposite. need your help with something. Can we talk?
My biggest fear is losing you, and that I won't know how you want me to care for you toward the end.
Remember what happened to Aunt Maria? I don't want that to happen to you.
You've taken care of me your whole life. Now it's my turn to take care of you.
So one of the things that this video demonstrates is there's lots of ways to start, some so good and some not so good. But the Conversation Project, that is a part of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement out of Boston, was started by Ellen Goodman, the Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, after the death of her mother, that for her didn't go so well. And so this is one of the resources available. And it begins to help you determine, how do you have this conversation? So Abby, the next slide. So where do you get started? You get started by thinking about, what am I afraid of? What fears do I have about having this conversation? And you could see in all of those actors, who I'm not sure were actors, actually. That's kind of how we all get started. What fears do you have about having this conversation with your family? What fears do you have about having the conversation with your doctor? If you're somebody that's seriously ill, you never want to lose hope. And somehow we think that if we talk about death, we'll bring death on, or we'll scare somebody and make them think that we're kind of rushing their death, when what we want to do is be prepared. The flip side of that is, what do you hope will happen? So if you begin to think about, what do you hope will happen as a result of the conversation with your family or with your doctor? And both of these things, we would love for you to put your answers in the chat so that we can share those a little bit later as part of our question and answer. And think about, what fears do you have? What do you hope will happen? So as we take a look then at this next segment, we begin to take a look at, who should we pick as our healthcare agent, and how do we get started with that? And we do that by looking at, again, the Conversation Starter Kit. So this is the document that is available from WellSpan for free, just by going to our website or going to your My WellSpan portal. You can also go to the link that's going to be put in the chat, and in the materials that will be sent to you, go directly to the Conversation Project. This booklet is not an advanced directive. So unlike the 5 Wishes booklet that we also use, that contains a living will and a durable power of attorney, this booklet doesn't have any forms, any of the legal forms that, again, are free to you. You don't need an attorney or a notary. These can be used by patients who already have a living will and a durable power of attorney, but have never actually discussed those documents. So I can tell you from my own personal experience, with having my husband die at age 51, my mother died at age 82, 6 months after she was diagnosed from cancer, my father at 81, and many other friends and family members. If we haven't talked about these things, people don't really understand the paper itself. If you just hand them your documents, it's much different if they hear it directly from you. They're never going to forget what you said or what you want them to do for you when you're not able to speak for yourself. This booklet itself is an excellent conversation guide, and it does recommend completing your living will and choosing your healthcare proxies by completing a durable power of attorney for healthcare. And the next slide shows another resource from the Conversation Project. If any of you have serious illness, you have congestive heart failure, you have COPD, you have cancer, kidney disease, any of those things where you need to think more about, if you were to have a heart attack or stroke, if you were to get in a car accident and not be able to speak for yourself when you were at the hospital, what do you want your healthcare team to know about what's most important to you, and how to make sure you're getting the care based on your wishes? If you're in an end-of-life crisis, do you want everything done? Do you want to only be kept alive by machines? Or do you want to be able to die at home in the comfort of being surrounded by your family. That's what these two booklets help you to determine. Now, our next video clip. How do you pick that healthcare agent who's going to be the persons actually, we recommend 3 people talk for you. So go ahead, Abby.
Be your healthcare proxy? Like if you need someone to tell the doctor what to? I just go with whatever the doctors say. I wouldn't want to bother them. They're so busy. Doctors know best, right?
Be your healthcare proxy? Sure, I'd be happy to. If I'm in town, check out my Instagram pics from Peru. Wish you were here.
Oh, I could never let you go. I can't even throw a plant away. As long as it's got one little green leaf. I'd be like, can't we upload her to the cloud?
Well, heck yeah. I've given this a lot of thought. Let me tell you what decisions you're best off going with. You never let them resuscitate. And if they even try to hook you up to one of those breathing machines, never. I got this. I totally got this.
How can you even talk about this? I can't, okay? I just can't. Mom, it's not like you're gonna die. No, I can't talk right now.
Oh wait, did I show you that meme from iFunny? The cat and the dishwasher? Oh my gosh. Okay, so the cat's like, bleh. And then he's like, wah! Oh wait, sorry, what?
Well, hon, you and I have been through so much together. Here's what we'll do. We'll sit down, we'll get a cup of coffee, and you tell me what matters to you.
Well, it wouldn't be easy. I mean, I'd be sad, but I'd have your back.
I remember when we went through this with Mom, we really spoke for her. So I think I can do that for you. Let's talk about what you would want.
So Abby, if you'll go to the next slide, what are you looking for in the 3 people who you would choose as your healthcare agent? You want somebody 18 years of age and older. You want somebody that you know will follow your wishes and not just implement their own because they want to hang on to you because they love you so much, but you don't want to linger, you don't want to be in pain, you don't want to suffer. You need somebody who can deal with conflict, with family members who don't understand what you've chosen, who may not have talked to you about it. You need somebody who can say, this is what mom or dad or brother or sister have said to us. This is what they wrote in their living will. This is what we all have to support because this is giving them the quality of life that they want. This is really fulfilling their wishes and not ours. And you also need somebody who's strong enough who can make these decisions in a crisis, who can work with your doctors when you're not able to speak for yourself and make your own decisions. That's when your healthcare agents will act. And you need to name them in a document called a durable power of attorney for healthcare in order for them to have legal standing in the state of Pennsylvania. If you do not do that, it goes by state regulation and becomes a healthcare representative. And that may be people that you don't want to have represent you. And there's a legal listing that we can provide you after this presentation. Who's the primary person that you're going to pick out of that 3-person panel and why? And how do you explain that to the other people on the panel? So oftentimes when I have these conversations with our patients or with community members, oftentimes they'll say, well, you know, I've got 3 children, I've got 4 children, and I'd like all of them, but who do I pick first? And they always have that criteria that I've just explained. This one is more level-headed. This one I can rely on more. This child's way emotional, and I know this would just be too tough for that son of mine. And so you sit everybody down and you make that explanation to them of why you've chosen someone to be your primary, somebody to be your secondary, and somebody who's going to be the 3rd person to show up in case the first 2 can't. Go ahead to the next one. So these are the possibilities. You know, we think For me, I'm 69, I'm fairly healthy. I don't expect to be at the end for another 30 years, but I could get in my car tonight and be on my way home and have somebody run a red light, and then I'm unconscious in the hospital, needing my powers of attorney to show up and represent me. But if you were to get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, say with a 5-year survival rate of over 60 and then over 50% in aggressive forms of that disease, what would you decide if you were age 30 or 50 and were perfectly healthy and might have that very good survival rate? But if you were age 75 or even 95, would you want to go through what you would need to go through in terms of treatments and how that might diminish the quality of life? My husband had pancreatic cancer at age 50, and 10 months later, he was not part of that 5%. So he was 51 when he was told there were no more treatments available and he needed to go into hospice. For him, he had been perfectly healthy. He wanted everything done because he had 3 children, 3 brothers and a mother still to enjoy life with. But if he were 85 or 90, going through the kinds of treatments and the kind of pain and agony he had to go through, I'm not sure we would have been making the same kinds of decisions. And so you need to look at, instead of going through those cancer treatments, if I have enough strength, do I want to take my granddaughter to Disney World so that she has that memory of me, as opposed to being sick all the time from cancer treatments? These are the kinds of possibilities you begin to think about to determine what am I going to choose in terms of life support. And really, the end of life crisis is being close to death because of a terminal illness, being in a coma with brain damage where you're not expected to recover. Usually that's the result of an accident, or permanent and severe brain damage where you may open your eyes, but you'd never know who you are or who you're with. Those are also the scenarios that are part of the 5 wishes that help you to determine, do you want full treatment, no treatment at all, or you want some help from your doctors to decide. So this next video, Abby, if you'll go to the next slide, this kind of are the next steps to begin the conversation. So what might happen if you sat down with your family and started this conversation? Next slide, Abby. This is a video now about a man in probably an all too familiar circumstance for many of us, and how his family sat down together on a weekend. They were all gathering for his 85th birthday, I don't remember the number right this minute, but how all of those conversations became so cherished, even though they were a little afraid to start them. So see what you think about this video and your own opportunities for conversations.
And finally tonight, ABC News wants to join you in something right at the heart of the American family: how we can all help the people who care about us make decisions near the end of our lives. And 9 out of 10 of you have told us that we should all be talking about it at all ages, what we want. And yet only a fraction of us have done it. And we know it makes a huge difference in the health of the caregiver as well as those cared for. So ABC News has taken cameras inside a vital, loving family, part of a new community, deciding to have the conversation.
This is 85-year-old Norb and his daughter Maureen.
My dad is 85 today. He's still very, very active. He's a wonderful friend.
Throughout life, daughter and father have always talked about everything, except one thing: how to control the end of your life in the same way you control the prime of your life. So dad and daughter gather the family together, 3 generations, for an act of love.
And so now we're just asking that you share some of your thoughts about what you would like at the end of your life, so that we can honor your wishes.
They are part of something new underway for families in America that says having the conversation is a gift parents and children give each other. And there's proof of the difference it makes. Studies show depression rates plummet after a loss if the families have had the conversation. Renowned physician Dr. Atul Gawande says doctors and nurses see it firsthand.
When you're there in that moment and you're talking to the family and you're saying, how much will it bother your father if he ends up this way? And they say, more often than not, I don't know. We never talked about it. That it is incredibly traumatic for the family, for the doctors involved. There's often conflict. It can tear families apart.
So Dr. Gwande has become part of a team led by Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Ellen Goodman. It is called the Conversation Project. It is a kind of guide for families looking for a way to begin.
If we give them a way to talk about it and give people something to hang on to when they're afraid to start this conversation, they can do it and pass it on.
Families like the Jennings. They looked over the conversation guide before they sat down together. First, there's laughter.
My golf swing's still good.
And then Dad directly eases his daughter's guilt and worry about having put their mother in hospice.
I felt like that meant we were giving up on Mom.
She was in a lot of pain, and I think it was handled real well.
And next, Maureen asks her dad for clarity on what he considers a good end to a great life.
So if you were in a condition where you couldn't make decisions for yourself, how extreme would you want us to take measures to save your life versus letting you go?
Well, I think I'm ready to go anytime. You know, I wouldn't prolong anything. I mean, I've lived a great life. Pretty lucky. And because of you guys, you know. And
unexpectedly, a grandson is inspired to speak up about his own wishes for his own life.
That if there was no meaningful communication, that I would want you to stop trying to intervene.
We aren't ready for you to go that soon.
Well, we're not ready for you to go that soon either, so.
One by one, the others weigh in, all ages.
People don't do that.
Happy birthday, dear Grandma.
And with that, another family has joined a kind of estate planning for the heart.
Go.
So estate planning for the heart. What a way to describe these cherished conversations. And I have to tell you, after that conversation, starting at age 18, you create your advanced directives, your living will and your durable power of attorney for healthcare. These are two documents that you do not need an attorney or a notary for. They're free documents that you can get from any health system. We use a document called the 5 Wishes. And you begin to think about not so much dying, but what quality of life do you want if you know you're going to die? And for some of us on this call, we've also experienced loved ones that have died at age 24, age 26, age 35. You know, it's not just about those of us who are getting older. It is about everybody that could approach this crisis in their early in their life as well as late in their life. So we'd also like you to think about, how would you want to die? I have an anagram that Ellen Goodman has created, and I'd love to do this because it helps us to think about what is that end stage that we want to be in. Again, if you'll put your words in the chat, then we'll be able to see them and share them as I get to that last piece of my presentation. This is another way that we can approach dying. And as you saw in that first video, it was a middle-class Caucasian family. And we have many cultures and many ways of dealing with death and dying. This will show us another approach. And again, a wonderful opportunity for a family to cherish their loved one. Thank you, Abby.
A couple of years ago, we had our first conversation project, and there was one individual who was a part of the initial conversation. About 6 months later, developed a cancer, very bad cancer with a bad prognosis. It was still hard to have the conversation, but she was she was much more open to us thinking through what she would want in those last few days or last few months for her, actually. She knew that she didn't want to die at home. She had her reasons for not wanting to do that. But she could talk about that in advance, and it just made for a much smoother transition. And the thing that was so exciting, she ended up being buried in a cemetery that she chose because one of the things that really mattered to her teenage grandson when he was a little kid was watching the trains go by. She chose a plot that was right along the train line, so we were there at the burial and the train goes by. And that was such a gift to that boy. And what his mother said was, because she had thought these things through and made some plans and communicated her wishes, she made what was such a difficult process so much sweeter. Having these conversations really makes a difference.
It makes a tremendous difference for us. And go to the next slide. So here's the anagram. And I saw people saying, I want to die with grace, without fear. I want to fall asleep and not wake up. I want to have it painless. And you won't see on this chart here of words, dying in the ICU, hooked up to a machine, being separated from my family. You know, what we all want is we want peaceful, we want dignified, we want comfortable, painless, celebrating with our family members, being surrounded by love and joy if we can. And for all of us who are people of faith, to have that faith sustain us during those days so there are no regrets for us or for our family members. So the next slide, Abby, if you would, is a letter that we also have received from the Conversation Project in the work that we're doing. And this is from a mother, a letter to her family. You can see her handwriting there in the lower right-hand corner. And I want to read this to you because this is a gift you too can give to your family. You can write them a letter. My husband decided to make audio tapes for his 3 children that he was leaving who were in their 20s. So don't panic, it's okay, a letter to my family. If you're faced with a decision you're not ready for, it's okay. I'll try to let you know what I would want for various circumstances, but if you come to something we haven't anticipated, it's okay. If you come to a decision point and what you decide results in my death, it is really okay. You don't need to worry that you've caused my death. You haven't. I will die because of my illness or my body failing or whatever. You don't need to feel responsible. Forgiveness is not required. But if you feel bad, responsible, guilty, first of all, don't. And second of all, know you are loved and forgiven. If you're faced with a snap decision, don't panic. Choose comfort, choose home, choose less intervention, choose to be together at my side, holding my hand, singing, laughing, loving, celebrating, and carrying on like we've always done. I will keep loving you and watching you and being proud of you. I know this is hard work for many of us because there's so much emotion attached to it. But Abby, the next slide. But if we give you this gift of conversation with this presentation tonight, and you can share that with many others, you can reach out to us to do this in a much longer fashion with your church, your community group, with any number of ways. Or even if you want to sit down one-on-one, when we get to the questions and comments, we can tell you how that can happen. And in the meantime, Abby, if you go to the next slide, this is our contact information at WellSpan for both Eve and myself. We also have a lot of information if you're a WellSpan patient in your WellSpan portal, quick links to Horizon Planning, and on our website as well, you go to Horizon Planning. All of these materials and all of the support we can provide to you are free. So I thank you so much for your time and your attention. And I wish you many blessings as you go through this journey of life.
Thank you, Roberta and Eve. I'm glad that you added the portal for more information. It gives us a lot to think about. Now we're going to hear from Michele Lefler and Debra Tuskar to talk about the role of a death doula. Welcome.
My name is Debra Tuskar. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate being invited. Michele Lefler and I work closely together. We've taken some of the similar trainings to work as death doulas. And I would like her to say a few words about herself. But before that, I could just say that I have lost family members and other people close to me through death. And I could see that the experience could have been different or better. And that really got my attention. You know, maybe because I'm thinking of my own death, but I found that I like helping people and supporting them in this part of their life. Michele?
I have a similar background to Deb with that. I came to this kind of work through losing a lot of friends and loved ones, very close family. My husband passed away when he was 24 years old, very unexpectedly. We had no plans, any idea of what we would do if we were faced with a situation like that. And that 10 years ago really made me start thinking about what I would want when I die, because I will. So that's what brought me to this, similar to Deb. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the importance of preparing for death. And we just heard a lot about that with the WellSpan presentation, and that was very informative. And that talked a lot about a clinical preparation for death, which we all need to have. That's very important. But there are other means to take into consideration when we're talking about the end of our life. And the thing is, we're all going to die. That's already been mentioned. Every one of us will die at some point. The question is when we will die, and that's what we don't know. Some people die later in life, some people earlier, and we just have no idea when that will be. So it's important to start thinking about this and preparing from the time you become a legal adult at 18, so that your wishes and your desires can be manifested in your death. So when thinking about your death, you have two choices mainly: to prepare for it or not to prepare for it. Preparing for your death allows you to experience the end of your life without needless worry over what to do. Those kinds of decisions will have already been made. And so once you reach the point that you're at the end of life, you don't have to sit here or sit there and think about what's going to happen, how you're going to get everything coordinated. That will have already been done, and you can just experience and enjoy the last of your life with your loved ones. Preparing for our death allows us to avoid being focused on last-minute practicalities. Again, that will already be taken care of. And it helps us and allows us to create a personal death experience. We can avoid the trap of dying the way everybody else does, having a funeral the way everybody else does, because we will have had the opportunity to think about what's important to us and how our spiritual and emotional needs can be taken care of at that time. And it does allow us to focus on emotional and spiritual needs of death and not just the clinical aspect of dying. So what happens if you don't prepare for your death? You have fewer options. When you're at that point, you're at the end of life, you are running out of time. You don't have a lot of time to do research and decide what you want. If you make absolutely no decisions and you're in an accident and die suddenly, then your loved ones are forced to make those decisions. And they're trying to do that at the moment that they're also actively grieving for your loss. And so sometimes in that situation, our loved ones will then pass the decisions off to strangers or those who aren't close to us. And so then our wishes are never taken into consideration. So there's a lot to take into account when it comes to dying, not just Do you want to be on life support? Do you want to be hooked up to a machine? There's funeral arrangements to think of. There's ideas of how you want to experience the death. Do you want to be at home? Do you not? All that. And then there's so much more. And so that it all needs to be planned in advance in order to make sure that you have your wishes taken into account. Next slide, please.
What is a death doula? I'm often asked that. Some people just want to understand what a doula is, but we understand that to be someone who provides guidance and support to another person during a big event or critical time in their life, like postpartum or birthing. The death doula, also known as the end-of-life doula or a midwife doula, or a death midwife, is the person that provides this care for the dying person. They can be part of a team. They can work very closely with a hospice group, or they act as individuals that are sought out by families, or they work in conjunction with spiritual leaders, ministers, priests, and rabbis. You can be called in when a death is imminent, like there wasn't a whole lot of planning, but the plan is being put together last minute, or even months in advance, like when a person receives a diagnosis of having a terminal disease. The goal is to help them create an environment that is calming and grounding, that recognizes them as individuals. It does change from person to person, but the general idea is that you're not completely out of control of the situation. Like I've had people who do not want to be in a room where everybody's standing around talking about them while they're in a semi-coma state, because they're sure they can be heard. They can hear that person. Rather, maybe they want some music. The other part is the death doula is trained and can work in conjunction with the religious beliefs, where we have a sense that when we die, our physical body ends, but our spiritual essence continues. And there's a process and there's different techniques to help release that and let that spirit move on to the next portion of its life or rebirth life. Next slide, please.
So what are the benefits of having a death doula? A death doula helps you die your way. What you want, your wishes, that your dying process should be on your terms, the way you want to die, and a death doula helps to coordinate that. They help to advocate for the dying person and their loved ones. There's a lot of legal, spiritual, health requirements to dealing with death, end of life, and a death doula helps you coordinate all that. They help you to navigate the silos of the clinical experience, the spiritual experience with your clergy, the funeral experience, the experience of your friends and family. All those are different silos that we tend to have in our minds when it comes to death, and a death doula can help the dying person and their loved ones to coordinate all those silos together to make it an easier experience and not so lonely and terrifying. Death doulas often act in a spiritual capacity, either in place of or in tandem with clergy, if you have clergy, and they help you to start planning now. Whatever age you're at, a death doula can help you start planning for your death at this point in time. Sometimes they act in the role of companion care if that's what you need or if that's what you want, but a death doula helps you to start the conversation. And we've been hearing a lot tonight about having the conversation, and a death doula is a person. Sometimes if you don't have anyone in your family or whatever your situation is, that you don't have someone to act in that capacity, so you don't even have somebody to have a conversation with, the death doula can stand in that capacity as well. Next slide, please.
To choose a death doula, more and more people want to make decisions around their dying experience. And death doulas are becoming more common, so finding an ally in this part of your life has become a bit easier. You may find a death doula through an organization like the National End of Life Doula Alliance or the International End of Life Doula Association, through a local hospice group, from a spiritual advisor, from speaking with a doctor or a nurse, word of mouth, or even an internet search. You want to get to know that person. You want to speak with them to see what their approach and philosophies are, and let them know what you're interested in. It's not always easy to know what services you might want, but this type of conversation allows that to unfold. And you may discover that your spiritual beliefs are something you want to be emphasized in that time of your life. And you're helping them to begin to understand your situation and what you want. And to quote, most of us do not know how to die. Having these conversations, which we've been talking about, speaking with someone like a death doula to understand what you might want. So having an advocate on your side can help relieve some of the burden from the people we love and give a little bit of control during a time that seems out of control. Next slide, please. Michele and I, we have mentioned before that we share similar backgrounds and thoughts. We come from a perspective of having an open heart, a lot of love and compassion for other people, and respect, and trying to honor their wishes. We come from a spiritual perspective and have a belief that people do, their spirits are in essence, and they transition elsewhere, and we'd like to assist with that. Michele?
It is important to know, if you're working with a death doula, what their approach to spirituality is, because that's important to many people. And some death doulas are more spiritual and some are less spiritual in their approach. So you need to know if that's something that's important to you and in what way when you're looking to reach out to find a death doula to work with. So just make sure you keep that in the forefront of your mind, because Deb and I are very spiritual in our approach, and some people like that and some people don't. So it is important to keep that in mind. Next slide, please.
To summarize, that having this type of support is critical. It can be part of your end-of-life plan. And it can be a gap, bridging the gap between, the medical, the clinical side, and the spiritual side. So even if you find yourself in a situation where you may be dying in a hospital, you can still have that. And we feel confident that people will become better educated, will use death doulas more and share that with their families. Even though there's no formal certification for death doulas, you have to know what you want, get a sense of it, and talk to the individuals and stuff.
Thank you, Michele and Debra. We will now ask everyone to unmute their mics for a Q&A. So I'll be looking at the chat to see if anyone has any questions in there. And if you have a verbal question, please go ahead and speak your mind. Do the 3 people you choose need to live nearby? So it sounds like this question is referring back to the having people who make decisions for you when it comes to an end-of-life experience.
I'll be glad to speak to that. When you think about the importance of having somebody who is nearby, if they need to come and be by your side. Now you might say, gosh, the person I trust lives a few states over. So that's okay. The important thing obviously is having somebody who you feel you can honor your wishes. But it might be also helpful to have somebody that is nearby. If you want that person to be with you, being able to get to the doctors, at least get to the hospital, be by your side quickly. So it might be good just to think about that. That might be a consideration. It's not necessary, but it's certainly an important consideration. The key thing is also being sure you have someone you can have a conversation with ahead of time. Go ahead, Roberta. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish, Eve.
No, I'm done. No, go ahead.
But also, with today's technology, we can video chat with somebody who's in another part of the country, in another part of the world. As Eve said, the most important thing is, what do you need in terms of support? How much do you want at least one person by your side who can make decisions for you? But know that with video calls, with phone calls, with all texting and all the different ways that we can now reach people, it's most important that the people that you pick will show up for you. So I can relate a story that after my husband died, I picked my two best friends and I sat down with them. I gave them my materials. I reviewed all of the questions with them. They both said, absolutely, Roberta, we will be there if you need us. We know what you've just gone through. We know you don't have other family. And a year later, the end of August, I was rushed to the hospital in a near-death experience where I had to go in for surgery. And I called the first one up and she said, oh my gosh, I'm 4 states away. I just can't get there, so I can't help you. Now, this was 15 years ago, so we didn't have as much virtual then as we do now. And the second person said, oh, I remember we talked. I don't know where those documents are. And what is it that I'm really supposed to do? It sounded a lot like those people being chosen as healthcare agents. Neither one of them showed up for me. And as I'm being rolled into surgery, the nurses are saying, you know, this is really serious. Don't you want somebody here with you? Don't you want somebody to be here when you come out of surgery? Well, of course I did, and I thought I had. But it's choosing the right people and making sure that they will show up for you in whatever way is needed.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's see here. Sounds like a death doula can also be the one maybe on the life. Okay. So continuation of that question. Sounds like a death doula can also be one of the 3 people at the end of life, correct?
Yes, a death doula can be one of the 3 people. That does happen sometimes, and other times a death doula is used for other reasons in addition to the 3 people that someone may have. So it's a personal choice depending on what you have, who you have, if you have somebody that can act in that 3-person capacity, or if you don't. There are times that a death doula does act in that role.
Okay.
Thank you. And there's also here a question for Morgan from York Libraries.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I started to write it and then I clicked send. So, Morgan, my daughter-in-law is actually going to have a baby in November, and I'm thinking that a postpartum doula would be absolutely perfect for her. Is there a network? They live in Virginia. They live in Norfolk, Virginia, and I would love to be able to connect her with that resource. And I was just wondering if you know, where I would start to find them.
That's a great question. I don't personally, I mean, I'm part of groups and stuff where I could ask around, but you could simply just do a Google search of postpartum doulas in your area. There's many different certifying agencies. I would definitely pick one that aligns with her views as far as what she's looking for. There's all different kinds. And just really what she would be looking for. But for the most part, when you're certified to be a postpartum doula, what I had talked about, it's across the board. And as they had talked about before with the death doulas and stuff, just do interviews, you know, have them come by and make sure that you really get along, because they're going to be spending time with your family. So you want to make sure that you mesh well. So that's where I would start, just with a Google search, and then do your interviews and to find the right person.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great questions. All right, another question here. What dying options are there if it is not an emergency, a more potentially extended situation, for example, and the hospital or at home are not options or not desired?
There is inpatient hospice. There are hospice homes that are non-clinical. Papa's House is one example in York County, where it is a either 5 or 6 bedroom home staffed by volunteers. Hospice and community care is one of the hospice organizations that have an inpatient building in Mount Joy, where they have clinical staff being able to provide care.
All right. Does that answer your question? Oh, are those options that can be chosen in advance?
They are. One of the things that we suggest is, as Michele was saying, do those plans ahead of time. So if you're dying at home is not an option, you don't want to be in the hospital, research what's available within the community that you live and talk with them, make plans with them. We also tell people that, we all hope that we can stay in our own home forever, but sometimes you get to the age of 90 and you're falling all the time. And your bedroom is on the second floor, your bathroom's on the second floor, and it becomes unsafe for you to continue to live in that house. So rather than going to the hospital, and then because it's unsafe to have you go home, you're then put into a facility that's not of your choosing, do that research as well before you get to that point of aging. Because if you are moved out of your home and into a assisted living facility, a personal care home, or a skilled nursing facility, you can't take your belongings. Typically, you're not taken back home to put all of your affairs in order. And so these are planning things that are very, very important as we age and as we approach an end-of-life situation potentially.
All right. And Gwendolyn says, thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right, if not, thank you everyone for participating. Some great questions there at the end. I just want to give you guys a reminder. You Belong With Us, the self-care event, is now postponed due to the rising number of COVID cases in our area. This concludes the 4 programs of the summer read on Thursdays. The programs are recorded and will be available to watch on the York County Library's YouTube channel. Consider showing them at a book group or to use as a discussion starter.
Please complete the reader survey available in chat to be entered for a chance to meet the author and receive an autographed copy of You Belong when Sebene Selassie visits our area on Monday, October 11th. Thank you, Abby Kramer, Tracy Van Marter, and Corey Strakemeyer for joining us as program planning partners. Thank you again to WellSpan Health, WITF's Transforming Health, Capital Blue Cross, the YMCA of York, and 80 libraries throughout the central Pennsylvania region. Good night, everyone. Stay well and stay connected to your library.